Hello, welcome again. My name is Zaga, and we'll be watching today Why Spain Still Has Cities in Africa by K.H. Anubis. The link's in the description below, and let's just start.
This is the Strait of Gibraltar, easily one of the most important waterways, not just for Europe, but for the entire world. Without it and its accompanying Suez Canal, all these countries would be landlocked, and international shipping would most likely avoid this entire part of the planet altogether. This passageway, barely 15 kilometers wide at its narrowest, separates Europe from Africa and Spain from Morocco. Except not entirely, as if you look closely, you will see these two Spanish exclaves in northern Africa. These are Ceuta and Melilla, Spanish cities located on what is normally the Moroccan side of the sea. But despite that, their residents are Spanish. They pay with euros, speak Spanish, have access to Spanish services, and fly the Spanish flag. And these cities aren't alone. For Spain, these are the Plazas de Soberanía, or the strongholds of sovereignty. And while most of them are just small rocks, one of which is hilariously connected to Morocco by the shortest border in the world, two of these have grown into sizable cities with creepily similar populations. And this means Spain, and therefore the European Union, has land borders in Africa. And while this is a huge deal in and of itself, what I actually want to talk about is, why does Spain even have entire cities on the other side of the sea? Or rather, why do they still have them today, decades after the European powers were supposed to abandon their colonies in Africa? Thanks to Paradox Interactive for making this video possible. This is Ceuta, or what the locals might call Ceuta, from the Latin septa, for the fortress upon the seven hills. At first glance, things don't seem much different from any other small cities over in Andalusia on the other side of the strait.
Yeah, I was just going to say,
they have quaint squares and seafood restaurants and dragon statues and nice beaches and Hindu temples and everything. However, Ceuta doesn't have an airport, so the only way to get there from mainland Spain is by a ferry or a special helicopter airline.
Interesting.
Yeah, I didn't actually manage to get a flight. The website was incredibly finicky and didn't actually let me pay. So, we can look at the heliport. By most accounts, it would be more or less completely unremarkable, were it not for its location, and therefore, this border. Alright, let's back up for a moment. These strongholds of sovereignty are sort of a catch-all term for a bunch of rocks within the Mediterranean owned and administered by Spain. These include everything from the tiny Peñón de Alhucemas to entire cities like Melilla and Ceuta, and it's these cities that I want to talk about, particularly this one, Ceuta,
I kind of knew about those cities, but what about the small places?
So Spain was decolonizing Morocco and never let go of the strategic city? That makes sense. European powers do that all the time.
True.
But wait, Spain never colonized Morocco, France did. And this city has actually been in Iberian hands since before the entire Iberian Peninsula itself. Here, let's look at this map I got from my hotel. It's kinda zoomed in, but we can deal with that. Now, 2,700 years ago, the main power of the Mediterranean world were the Phoenicians. And to them, this city had not just a perfect location near the Strait of Gibraltar, but also perfect geography in and of itself. The old city is located here, on the peninsula of Almena, connected by a narrow, easily defensible isthmus to the continent, only a proverbial stone's throw from the powerhouse city Gades. Now it is known as Cadiz. Or I guess technically it was a peninsula, but you know what? Actually, that proves my point. So in other words, it was incredibly valuable and incredibly easy to defend. It's not exactly the kind of place you would let a rival power just take from you in one day with barely any fight.
True.
Right? To understand what's going on with these borders nowadays, though, we need to go a bit forward, past the Roman era, but still before Spain was even aware of the Americas. And in fact, back when the map was sort of the other way around. Here, look at this map from around 1360. During this time, the very south of the Iberian Peninsula was ruled by the Emirate of Granada. Islam first spread into the peninsula in the 8th century, under the rule of the Umayyads in Damascus. And Ceuta itself was used by the Umayyads as a launching point into the Iberian Peninsula. Oh, by the way, I might be pronouncing it Ceuta in English, but actually most of the locals here might pronounce it more like Ceuta, and that relates to the etymology of the city's name. Greek cartographers would refer to this Phoenician city as Abila, after the nearby Mount Abila, now known as Jebel Musa, a mountain on the Moroccan side. When the Romans came in, they would take note of the presumably very familiar 7 hills in the area, or the 7 brothers, upon which there was a fort, or in Latin, Castellum ad Septem Fratres. This was of course shortened to Septum or Septa, and when the Islamic caliphates invaded in the 8th century AD, this became Sebta in Arabic, or Sebta in Amazigh or Berber, and then became Ceuta in Portuguese, and is now of course pronounced as Ceuta by its Spanish inhabitants. After the Umayyad invasion of the Iberian Peninsula in 711, the majority of the region spent nearly 800 years under the rule of various Islamic dynasties. Neither side was completely unified the whole time, but during this time there were 2 constants. The very north was Christian, while the south was Islamic, and both sides, really wanted to control the other half. This began a centuries-long campaign among the disunited northern kingdoms to try to expand to the south, which in their perspective was a reconquest, or a reconquista. But contrary to popular belief, the Reconquista was not a single glorious push to conquer the Iberian Peninsula, but a much slower affair that unfolded over centuries. During this time, the Christian kingdoms of the north were anything but united, and for their part, neither were the Islamic taifas in the south. If you want to see for yourself what this period of history was like and change the tides of history, you can recreate this for yourself in the upcoming Fate of Iberia expansion pack for Crusader Kings 3. This pack, coming out on the 31st of May, will add new events, traditions, outfits, and music, all inspired by the Reconquista.
Yeah.
You can get the Fate of Iberia expansion pack and help support the channel by clicking the link in the top of the description. Okay, now to find out how Ceuta ended up in Iberian hands. Eventually, Portugal captured the city of Ceuta from the Marinid Sultanate, a Berber kingdom that ruled Morocco at the time. You can even see it on the design of the city's flag, featuring the same background as the flag of Lisbon. Meanwhile, the coat of arms is almost identical to Portugal's. Ah, crap, I really need to get this to Spaghetti Road. The area also had another geographic quirk, which served to Portugal's advantage and to Morocco's detriment: the Rif Mountains, making this region considerably harder to hold onto from the Moroccan core. Portugal sent forces to besiege the city, however its defenses were so unprepared for this attack that they essentially ended up handing the city over at the end of the day. And with that, Portugal took control of a vital port at the mouth of the Mediterranean, not just from the Moors, but also from their rival Castile. And it wasn't just important for trade heading in and out of the Mediterranean, but also to and from many of the real richest powers at the time, deeper in Africa. But instead of continuing through Ceuta as it had been, the trans-Saharan trade simply went through nearby Tangier instead. In 1437, Portuguese forces tried and disastrously failed to take Tangier, and ended up signing a deal with the Marinids, promising to give Ceuta back to them. Eventually. As Portugal began to expand all around the African coast, however, they would briefly take nearby Caçadeiras and Tangier itself, eventually formalizing their rule over Ceuta. After the Iberian Union between Spain and Portugal formed in 1580, more and more Spaniards began to move to Ceuta, gradually shifting the population from Portuguese to Spanish. It was for this reason that, when Portugal fought for its independence in 1640, Ceuta became one of the few cities in Portugal's sphere of influence to side with Spain, eventually being formally granted to Spain in 1668. However, for most of the 20th century, Spain actually held a protectorate over the northern coast of Morocco, and in fact this station right behind me used to serve trains heading between Ceuta and the capital of this protectorate, Tetuan. What I mentioned earlier about Spain not colonizing Morocco isn't completely true, though it was mostly true. I know you probably might know me as the person behind the technically true geography facts, but just bear with me here. In 1912, Spain's sphere of influence over the northern Moroccan coast was turned into a full formal protectorate, alongside another strip in the south. This protectorate was short-lived though, as the Spanish protectorate in Morocco combined with French Morocco in 1956 to form regular Morocco. Though of course, despite being good Catholics, Spain never pulled out of Ceuta and Melilla. And now, what does Morocco think of this whole arrangement? Well, given that their attempted siege of Ceuta was the longest siege of a single city in history at 27 years, yeah, what do you think they think about it? To Morocco, these cities are core territories that Spain illegally holds, a classic case of European colonialism. while to Spain, they are centuries-old integral parts of their nation. Thus far, Spain doesn't even address the issue, and even besides Spanish protectionism, there is still one major hurdle to these cities ever becoming Moroccan anytime soon. The people in Ceuta and Melilla, who generally seem to wish to remain with Spain, and who would surely complain if they now had to take a plane to get to Spain. To be fair to Morocco though, it's easy to see why this drives them insane and gives them so much pain, if I were to say it plainly. In a sense, it almost resembles the situation with Gibraltar on the other side of the strait, which remains a British overseas territory no matter what Spain thinks of the arrangement.
I still don't know how that happened.
In 2021, Morocco closed its northern land border with Spain, but it wasn't because of COVID, or at least not entirely. This is Brahim Ghali, and when Spain allowed him to seek treatment for COVID-19 in Logroño, Morocco didn't take kindly to this. You see, Ghali is the leader of a group known as the Polisario Front, the group seeking independence for Western Sahara from Morocco. In the following months, Moroccan border guards strangely turned a blind eye when a large group of migrants, most from Morocco itself, made an attempt to jump the border into the Spanish cities of Ceuta and Melilla. This is something Morocco is normally much more proactive in preventing, as it should be mentioned that, despite these disputes, and many others like water rights around the Canary Islands, the two countries generally work amicably in curbing illegal immigration, drug trafficking, and cross-border terrorism. As these cities, despite any tourism slogans they may throw around, often which remains a British overseas territory no matter what Spain thinks of the arrangement. In 2021, Morocco closed its northern land border with Spain, but it wasn't because of COVID, or at least not entirely. This is Brahim Ghali, and when Spain allowed him to seek treatment for COVID-19 in Logroño, Morocco didn't take kindly to this. You see, Ghali is the leader of a group known as the Polisario Front, the group seeking independence for Western Sahara from Morocco. In the following months, Moroccan border guards strangely turned a blind eye when a large group of migrants, most from Morocco itself, made an attempt to jump the border into the Spanish cities of Ceuta and Melilla. This is something Morocco is normally much more proactive in preventing, as it should be mentioned that, despite these disputes, and many others like water rights around the Canary Islands, the two countries generally work amicably in curbing illegal immigration, drug trafficking, and cross-border terrorism. As these cities, despite any tourism slogans they may throw around, often serve more as the gateways to Europe than to Africa. I mean, put it this way, I'm still going to say I've been to Africa now that I've been to Ceuta, but if I'm going to go traveling around the rest of Africa, I'm certainly not going to use them as a jumping off point. After all, the flights from these cities to other African cities are much fewer and further between than the flights to European cities. At the end of the day though, Ceuta and Melilla are essentially no different than any other Spanish island city like Palma de Mallorca or Las Palmas de Gran Canaria. They just so happen to have a side attached to Morocco.
What do you think about it? I never thought about. I mean, like, I knew that Spain had some cities in Northern Africa, but I didn't really realize. Well, no one really knows why. Well, now I know why. So, what do you think? Did you find that interesting? I did. So, anyway, go back to the author of this, give him a like, and make sure that you're gonna check out his other videos. I definitely will. So, thank you for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye!